Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, thank you for joining me for another episode. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some powerful strategies to help harness worry and to help manage painful and difficult thoughts. The view that we're taking today with this episode, it's not about getting rid of thoughts or controlling our thoughts. That's not something that's possible. And the more we struggle with our thoughts and our feelings, for example, when it comes to anxiety, the more they tend to amplify. No, what we're going to be doing are talking about some strategies that will help you to put some space between you and what you're thinking, and to give you that moment to be able to become more present in the moment and be able to move forward in alignment with what's important to you. So to step forward doing the things that are aligned with your values. So it's important also, I think, for me to just remind us all that anxiety and worry and painful and difficult thoughts are all part of being human. Anxiety is a completely human emotion. All emotions are important, and they're often signposts for us. And sometimes worry can be helpful if there's a spot on your arm that has changed and it prompts you to take yourself to the GP or to the skin clinic to have some mole mapping done, or to just simply ask the question of your GP whether or not they are concerned that the changes might be something that require more investigation. Then that worry and that action has absolutely served a purpose. But there are a lot of worries and thoughts that we become what we say fused with. We can become fused with them, like we're connected so tightly that we just can't see anything else that's going on around us. It's very painful. It's extremely distressing. And I think back to when I was a new mum, and my mental health was not great. In fact, I was struggling with postnatal anxiety and depression, but didn't realize I was so in the thick of it. And this is what is important too for us to know, is that when we are more aware of mental health and the challenges that people can experience, we're hopefully in a better position to be able to recognize what's happening in those around us. So my mental health wasn't great, and I had painful health anxiety about both of our children when they were born. But let's just start with number one. When he was born, he was a healthy kid, absolutely healthy, very, very lucky. And when he came home and over the ensuing weeks and months, had all the things that normally happen with kids. He had the odd cold, he had the odd rash, he had the odd fever, all of the things that come and go with, little viruses kids pick up. And of course, there are times when children can become unwell. Of course, it's important for us not to be dismissive. But I was so anxious about every tiny little thing, even if I could have taken a little bit of perspective, if I could have zoomed out a little bit from my very, very focused microscopic view of what was happening, I would have been able to see that he was eating and drinking, he was laughing and playing, that a rash on his tummy was not really interfering with his behaviour, and I could have had a better perspective of all of the things that point towards a child being very unwell. But any tiny little thing that went wrong or that was out of the ordinary was sickening for me. And my thoughts would immediately go to the idea that this was a life-threatening situation. And so I would be at the GP every other day asking about this, asking about that. And my doctor was so patient and so beautiful. And eventually, in conjunction with my psychologist and Peter, my husband, and one of my long time friends, Christy, we came up with a plan whereby Christy was a more experienced mum. By the time I had number one, she had 3 children, and I was able to see a situation and talk to Peter and talk to Christy and say, this is what I'm observing. These are the thoughts I'm having. These are the worries I'm having. This is the conclusion that I'm arriving at, that this is going to end in death. To be honest, that's really where pretty much my thoughts were always going. And I was able to have a conversation with them both and help share their perspective. They shared their calm with me. And a lot of the time that was helpful enough to prevent me from immediately seeking that reassurance and alleviating that high anxiety by making an appointment and going to the doctor. But there were also many times I'd have a conversation with the both of them and I would make that appointment anyway. I was not able to manage my anxiety well, and I had a lot ahead of me from that point of view. And from that time in my life, I had a lot ahead of me in terms of learning about anxiety and learning how to manage it and really being able to better manage really difficult situations. And so when we have these thoughts that we fuse with, we become so connected with them that they feel like the truth, they feel like the absolute truth or prediction, and they are so painful that we desperately want some reassurance or some relief. And it can be a really difficult way to live. I know this to be true because I lived like that for a very long time. What has helped me enormously, I mentioned to you before that I meditated twice daily for 20 minutes. Before I had children, that was wonderful for my mental health and my anxiety and my depression. My depression lifted, and the meditation continued to help me with my anxiety, because meditation is about practicing maintaining the spotlight of our attention in the present moment, whereas anxiety will draw our attention forward into the future with all the what ifs and all the catastrophic thinking, or we'll turn the clock back and we'll go back to something that's happened, something we said, something we did, and we'll ruminate and we'll worry. Did I say something wrong? Did I upset someone? Did I embarrass myself? If there's a social anxiety component. And so present moment awareness is extremely powerful when it comes to living with anxiety and living a really rich life with anxiety and thriving with anxiety. So today what I wanted to share with you are strategies that have been extremely powerful in my life. And I've shared with you before which one of these strategies I use, but today I'm going to share a whole lot more so you can choose the one and play around with them to see how they work for you. I'm not suggesting try all of them on every day for size, but listen to the podcast, make a couple of notes and choose one place to start. I think that's really good advice for any time we're doing anything new. We can get a lot of information, but it's about making change, doing something different to make a positive difference for you in your own life. So my invitation to you is this: hear me out, hear the different strategies, and then choose one that you would like to experiment with and just see how you find it. So it's natural that we have negative thoughts, and it's because we evolved to be on the lookout for danger. We've evolved with a negativity bias to stay safe. Safety and security are our fundamental drivers of our brain. And so we naturally tend to think more negative thoughts than we do positive ones. And I know for myself that I could get feedback from a presentation and I could have 150 comments that are positive and uplifting and really make me feel good, that I've made an impact, that people have taken away really meaningful information and are able to put that into practice in their lives. And there might be one comment that might have said, didn't really find this applicable for myself, or it could be a comment that just said, went on too long, or I don't know. I mean, you can't please everyone all the time. And out of, let's say, 151 people, if 150 people say wonderful things and give brilliant feedback and one person says something that's difficult to hear, that's the one that you spend all the time focusing on. That's just the way we are. It's just the way we work. And what I'm sharing today will help with those sorts of situations and with many other situations where you find you're experiencing difficult and painful thoughts. And for not 1 minute would I like you to think for any second that I do not share compassion with you and empathy for anyone who lives with a lot of worry, a lot of painful and difficult thoughts. I know what that is like. I have been there. I am far better able to manage my thoughts now with the skills that I'm sharing with you today. But please don't think for a minute that anything that I share ever on this podcast will take away from the understanding that living with anxiety is really difficult. But I really want you to know that there are a whole range of strategies that you can try and experiment with, a bit like a curious scientist. Try them on for size, see how they go, see how they feel. And remember that today, with what I'm sharing, it's not about ridding ourselves of worries or ridding ourselves of painful thoughts. It's about putting some space between us and what we're thinking so that we're in a position to be more mindful and to make choices about what we do that is aligned with what's important to us, what matters to us. So here we go. So one of the strategies that we can use, so as I mentioned before, fusion is about this connection, this really sort of strong bond. Think about that epoxy glue. I'm not sure if that's the right name for it, but that araldite, that really strong glue that connects two things together. And when we're fused with a thought, we're so strongly connected with it that it's all encompassing and it's all consuming. The strategies that I'm sharing with you today are called diffusion strategies. Diffusion is not one technique in particular, it's a process. It's about the opposite of fusion. It's about separating. It's about putting some space, again, between who we are and what we're thinking, because thoughts at the end of the day are just a bunch of words and pictures in our head. Just a bunch of words and pictures in our head, but they can have a lot of power over us. So how can we put a little bit of space between us and what we're thinking? Well, I have a number of strategies for you today. The first one is simply give your mind a name. This is something we've done in our home. This is something that I do. My mind is Sam. And so I could combine this idea with a second, and I'll share that in a moment. But I could say, oh, Sam, you're sharing an idea with me again. And that's a combination of the fact that thoughts are ideas and the fact that my mind is Sam. And that puts a little bit of separation between who I am, Jodi, and my mind as a separate entity. So we're separating out our mind as a separate entity to us. So that gives us that space between who we are and what we're thinking. So we can name our mind. And I shared a second strategy in there where we can think about thoughts as ideas. And for parents listening, you might say to your child to help introduce these ideas, oh, you're having the idea that, oh, your mind is sharing the idea that you won't have any friends when you go to high school, or whatever it is that is the worry in the moment. Another thing that we can do, another diffusion technique, is to thank our mind. So I could say, oh, thanks, Sam. I understand that you're worried about whether or not that's going to get finished on time. Thank you very much. Appreciate your concern, but I'm okay. All right. And that, again, is something that puts a bit of distance, a bit of space between me, Jodi, and my mind, Sam. Another one of these diffusion strategies is to use the silly voices technique. And you could do this as an adult, or you could do this with your children. And this is where you might find a particular thought is a bothersome thought, and it could be any number of things. It could be that you're not going to get the job that you've applied for, or that you're not going to get the time off on the holidays that you're after, or you're going to miss something important because of a work commitment, or a friend isn't going to forgive you because you did something that you were concerned about and you want to share an apology with them. There are infinite number of thoughts that can be worrying. Sometimes, and again, not to make light of it and not to take away the pain and the recognition that thoughts can be so painful and so distressing, the silly voices technique is about using a silly voice like a Donald Duck or a Mickey Mouse, or you could even use a voice-changing app on a phone, and I've done this in the past with our children here in our home as well, is to isolate the thought. And the thought, I'm just going to make something up here, I'm not going to pass my maths test. Okay, I'm just going to make something up. So if that was a really painful thought that a person was fusing with, then you could type that into a voice changing app or just record it into a voice changing app, play it back in a silly voice like the chipmunks, and it starts to create that separation. Remember, this is about distance. This is about space. So we can become more present and more mindful and make a decision about what we're going to do. Because when it comes to our thoughts, we often give our thoughts way too much credit for our behavior and what we can do. But in actual fact, we can move forward with difficult and painful thoughts. It's much more helpful if we can diffuse from them, if we can get that separation and distance. But our thoughts don't actually control what we do. Okay, we can move forward with them, but we won't make a decision to move forward with them if we're not being present, if we're swept away by them while we're fused. Another strategy that you could try is to type your thought into a Word document. Jump on your laptop, jump on your iPad, whatever it is that you use, your Mac, and type the thought out. Type it out. Let's say, I'm not going to get a promotion. Let's say that's the thought. So you could type, I am not going to get the promotion into the document. Then what you could do is you could change the font to a really silly font and change the color at the same time. Change it to magenta, put it in a child's handwriting font, maybe blow it up so it's a big font size, it could be 20, 24, maybe change the font size again, change the color again. Think about it from the point of view as a bunch of words on a piece of paper, because in our minds, our thoughts are words and pictures. Our memories are words and pictures. They can be difficult to live with. Absolutely they can. These strategies can help put space between who we are and what we're thinking. One of the ones that I've shared before widely is the idea of, I'm having the thought that I'm not going to get the promotion, or I notice I'm having the thought that I'm not going to get the promotion. And that is, again, another really powerful distancing technique. One last idea is to write it down. Writing our thoughts down immediately show us that we are having thoughts. Okay, we are having thoughts. If we are having thoughts, we can write them down. If we are our thoughts, of course we couldn't, could we? And so writing them down, taking that time to really deeply narrate about what you're thinking and feeling can be a really powerful strategy for putting some distance again between who you are and what you're thinking. And of course, I've shared the idea before that we can ask the question, is it helpful? So it could be, what I would say is, I notice I'm having the thought that I'm not going to get the promotion. Is it helpful? No. Okay, what would be helpful? All right, in this moment, become present. It would be helpful for me to prepare for that interview. I am not going for a job interview. However, I'm just using this as a hypothetical example. And so all of these are diffusion strategies. Diffusion is a process. These are all just ideas about how we can start to put some space between us and what we're thinking. One of the references I love from Dr. Russ Harris is the idea of radio doom and gloom, that our minds are a bit like radio doom and gloom, and 24-hour radio, always playing, always thinking, lots of thoughts, lots of the same thoughts, lots of negative thoughts. And what we want to do is we want to be able to sort of put the thoughts to the background, a bit like we're turning down the dial of the radio. It's still playing. We're not getting rid of what we're thinking. We're just moving it out of the way. We're moving it off center stage. We're moving it to the background. Okay. And so we can get on with doing what it is that we want to do. So again, we're separating. Another word for this is unhooking. Unhooking, a bit like you're hooked on a thought, you're hooked by a thought, like a fish on a line, then we're unhooking, and that's part of that separation process. Just remember that our thoughts and what we think doesn't control what we do. We can take mindful, values-aligned action forward, even if it's a small step, despite the fact that we are having unhelpful, painful, and difficult thoughts. I really hope that this episode is going to help you to choose one, put it into practice, and eventually it will become part of the default way that you approach these challenges. I know now when I have a difficult thought, sometimes all I need to do is ask if it's helpful. I don't ask if it's true. Maybe it is true. Maybe I did miss an opportunity and I'm reflecting on that and it's painful. And so the reflection and the thoughts around it, the question is it helpful? Because whether it's true or not is not important. It's about how we're spending our time, how we're moving forward, what we're doing, and we can make the choices that are more in line with what matters to us if we can become present in the moment. And I hope that one of these many ideas that I've shared with you today helps you do just that. Thank you for joining me. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.